The police were counting the bodies of the missing men inside the thick layer of ice. At that moment, what will the police do to catch this perverted murderer? The story begins at the top of the Cow Mountain in Alaska. A hunter raised his gun to aim at the caribou herd, moving silently in the distance. The last rays of sunlight flashed on the edge of the mountain. The animals seemed to receive an invisible command. They accelerated simultaneously and rushed straight down the cliff without hesitation. This opened the chain of horrifying events that were about to happen. When darkness covered the ground, at the Arctic Research Station near the town of Ennis, 6 employees were still working as usual. Suddenly, one of them began to tremble violently. The screen immediately switched to 3 days later. A car drove into the research station. Because the driver kept calling but no one answered, he had to go in to check. Unexpectedly, there was no one inside. A dark shadow passed by. The dining table still had food left untouched. The TV was still playing. The driver was suspicious and searched everywhere. Suddenly, he found a piece of human tongue under the table. Police Chief Liz quickly arrived at the scene. Without saying anything, she immediately turned off the TV that was on. Liz then began to carefully observe everything around her. The missing people's phones were all there. This proved that they had not left the station to do their duty. Based on the freshness of the food, Liz determined that this group of people had disappeared for at least 48 hours. She suggested that a helicopter be immediately dispatched to search the surrounding area. Soon after, the police discovered a strange, broken object. There were traces of wear and tear on it. It looked like it had been licked many times. It was likely that these were traces left by fishing lines. This showed that its owner was a local. At present, there were still many unexplained clues. Liz hoped they would find something more. When she entered a laboratory, she was surprised to see a large letter written on the whiteboard: "We will all die." This made the disappearance mysterious. After that, Liz and her colleague returned to the police station. She still had many questions. Unexpectedly, someone had been waiting in the office for a long time. That person's name was Evan. She had taken over a case 6 years ago. At that time, an indigenous person was murdered. That person had opposed local mining activities. In order to prevent Evan from being caught up in the power struggle, Liz transferred her to the criminal department. Liz stripped Evan of his right to investigate the case. However, Evan did not give up. Over the years, Evan had quietly collected quite a few clues. Coincidentally, Evan heard that the police found a tongue at the research station, so Evan immediately went to ask about the situation. Because 6 years ago, the victim's body in that case also lost its tongue. This made Evan feel that the two incidents were related. Liz immediately woke up from her thoughts. She immediately took out the old murder case file to check. The victim was a woman named Annie. There were 32 stab wounds all over her body. When Liz reviewed all the documents, in addition to the cut tongue, she also discovered a detail related to this disappearance. It was a coat identical to Annie's. It appeared on a research station employee. This showed that the relationship between the two was not simple. At the same time, a native hunter named Rose was standing in the house. She suddenly saw a figure that should not have appeared here. That person was her long-dead husband. Rose did not show any fear on her face, but she quietly followed her husband deeper into the snow. Not long after, the man stopped. He suddenly performed a strange dance on the snow. Then he pointed in a direction. Rose looked in the direction and immediately fired a flare. It turned out that she had found the missing staff of the research station. Liz and Evan immediately rushed to the scene. When the two witnessed the scene before their eyes, they were extremely surprised and scared. On the thick layer of ice appeared fierce faces. They seemed to have experienced something extremely terrifying before they died. Even though they were frozen into ice statues, their faces still showed panic and fear. What was even more strange was that their bodies were not wearing clothes. Their belongings were neatly arranged nearby. One of them had a strange symbol on his forehead. While everyone was still surprised, a body suddenly let out a terrifying roar. The sudden scene made Liz, an experienced police officer, tremble with fear. She immediately went to find a geologist at the school. His name was Thomas. He had briefly cooperated with the research station. Liz wanted to know what the team was looking for. Thomas didn't know much. He only knew that they were always digging deep into the ice to find microorganisms. They said they wanted to trace the origin of life on Earth. The team also had some other strange topics, but Thomas was excluded from those studies. Meanwhile, Evan sent Rose home. When Rose heard that the location of the body was guided by a ghost, she didn't seem surprised. Because for the natives living in the harsh polar regions, they were too used to phenomena that could not be explained by science. Rose believed that her husband didn't appear to take her away, but that he wanted to convey something. When Rose mentioned the strange symbol on the body's forehead, she rarely showed seriousness. Rose said it was some kind of ancient image. Evan immediately had doubts. Evan remembered that Annie had the same tattoo on her body. At this time, the bodies were dug up from the ice. Liz ordered a bulldozer to take them to the indoor ice rink. After thawing, the police would conduct a detailed inspection. Based on the shape of the ice, the police counted 5 heads and 9 feet. What else was inside would have to wait until tomorrow. However, when people experience a sudden drop in pressure, their eardrums can burst. Extreme panic can also cause hallucinations. This leads to irrational, self-destructive behavior. This may be the reason why the victims' faces became so painful and ferocious. A young assistant speculated that perhaps polar bears had invaded the research station. This caused the victims to panic and run outside to avoid danger. The screams from the bodies were just muscle reflexes. Liz nodded in agreement. But until the police had solid evidence, everything was just speculation. When the assistant checked the victim's phone, he accidentally discovered a video. The person in the video was a researcher named Clark. Clark was muttering something. Then the research station suddenly lost power. Could it be that the victims were attacked in their homes, and then the killer took the bodies out? Liz and her assistant then followed the lead to the logistics company that had cooperated with the research station. From the words of the delivery driver, the police learned that Clark was the most unusual person. He had often run around in the snow shirtless. Moreover, Clark also had a spiral tattoo on his chest. Liz was extremely happy and immediately looked up Clark's credit card records. She quickly found the tattoo artist who had done the tattoo for him. This person sent 2 photos. It turned out that Clark had tattooed the exact same tattoo on Annie. This matched the detail that the two were wearing the same type of jacket. It turned out that Clark and Annie had been lovers for 6 years. So the police could also explain why they found Annie's tongue in the research station. When the 2 cases were actually connected, Liz took the initiative to offer to cooperate with Evan. Because Evan had a lot of information related to the murder case years ago, the 2 of them went to the research station to search Clark's room, but they didn't find any valuable clues. The jacket was also missing from the closet. However, Evan thought in a different direction. If Clark and Annie knew each other, then maybe Annie's brother had met Clark. Sure enough, when Evan brought Clark's photo to find Annie's brother, he immediately confirmed that he had known Clark. Annie's brother even sold an old RV to Clark. Evan got the license plate number and quickly left. She assumed that was where Clark used to date Annie. Because Evan was a local who grew up here, she immediately guessed the only abandoned parking lot in town. There were only a few cars there. It didn't take long for Evan to find Clark's RV. Liz received a call and immediately went to the scene. Later, Liz and Evan discovered that the inside of the car was full of traces of a ruined life. There was a phone on the floor. Evan recognized it as Annie's. There was a giant spiral symbol painted on the roof of the car. One thing that surprised Liz and Evan was that there was a humanoid doll on the bed. At that moment, Liz received a call from her assistant. He informed her that the ice in the skating rink had almost melted. Liz and Evan immediately went to check. After the police counted the bodies, they found that Clark was not among them. Evan thought that Clark was most likely still alive. After the ice sculptures were brought back and melted, the police discovered that a body was missing. What was even more bizarre was that there was a person who still showed signs of life. The police quickly took that person to the hospital. Liz had previously speculated from the clues that Clark was possibly seriously involved in this case. Now he suddenly disappeared, so the police must quickly find him. Robert not only mobilized the entire police force, but he also summoned the hunters in town. Robert described Clark's physical features and asked everyone to focus on the area where the ice statue was found. The police would then expand the search around. Evan felt that this method was not good because it was difficult for hunters to control their behavior. She was afraid that they would accidentally kill someone, so she went in the opposite direction to search. Evan threw an orange forward. Unexpectedly, the orange rolled back to her feet. Although Evan was surprised, she did not panic because strange things often happen in this area. Meanwhile, Liz Liz and her assistant brought all of Clark's belongings to the police station. They hoped to discover any missed clues. Liz's assistant was very curious why Liz stopped cooperating with Evan. It was obvious that Evan was very good at organizing documents. Liz hesitated for a moment, and then she recounted what happened many years ago. At that time there was a thug who often beat his girlfriend. However, that girl always refused to report to the police. She insisted that the injuries were caused by her fall. Liz knew the whole story, but she could only do nothing. Until one day, Liz and Evan discovered that the girl had been killed by her boyfriend in her room. Since then, Evan always felt guilty. Evan thought that Liz could have prevented the tragedy from happening. From then on, they became distant. Liz was always rational and worked according to her own rules, while Evan was an emotional person. Whenever Evan felt dissatisfied, she would act without thinking, so Liz and Evan could not have become partners. Unexpectedly, many years later, they reunited because of the ice statue case. Evan took the initiative to help Liz organize the files. She arranged all the items on the floor in order. There were many photos of Clark and Annie. Liz did not understand why Clark and Annie had loved each other for many years, but had to hide their relationship. There was a photo together that caught Evan's attention. The photographer seemed to have just dyed Annie's hair. There were traces of blue dye on the photo. Liz and Evan immediately went to the only hair salon in town. Evan quickly found the same dye as the one in the photo. Unexpectedly, the owner was an old friend of Annie's. The girl revealed to Liz and Evan that the tattoo on Annie's body was a dream. Since Annie met Clark, she became unusually mysterious. Annie had a big argument with an engineer at the research station. That made the other person angry and quit his job. Then that person moved to the edge of the ice to become a hunter. The hair salon owner also revealed an important piece of information. When Nick had an appointment with John, he called Robert. Nick revealed that he and Clark had a connection, but Liz only found out about this now. Evan was furious and cursed. She was sure that Robert was deliberately hiding the clues because he was involved in the mining area. Annie was the most vehement opponent of mining. She said that half the town's population worked in the mine, so when the hospital investigated, they encountered many obstacles. Now the police should still focus on the missing case. Why did Annie's tongue appear at the research station? What about the ice sculptures? But Evan did not want to let Robert go. She went to the skating rink to ask him. Evan did not understand why Robert hid everything. Unexpectedly, Robert said that Annie had many boyfriends. He felt that it was not an important clue. Liz interrupted Evan and Robert's argument and told him to quickly find Clark, the missing man. Then Liz watched Robert leave. Liz reminded her assistant not to forget to unlock Annie's phone. Maybe they had an important clue. Although Evan was not satisfied with Liz's handling, she still tried to investigate. Evan drove to Manston's house in town to ask him to find the whereabouts of the engineer who left the research station. Manston immediately agreed, but he made a strange request. He wanted her to tell him the biggest secret in his heart. She thought for a moment and said that what she cared about most was her mother. Because her father was a heavy drinker, her mother took her and her sister away from home early. But then her mother suffered from mental problems. Her mother often saw strange things, until one day her mother left and never came back. After Manston promised to help Evan investigate, she was about to drive away. Suddenly, she heard a strange call. Evan saw an unclear figure in front of her. She was about to chase after him when she slipped and fell. The next second, she saw herself as a child. Could it be that she also inherited mental illness from her mother? When Evan regained her composure and returned to the car, she received a call from her sister's husband. He said that Evan's sister suddenly screamed loudly and ran away from home. Evan hung up the phone and drove to the abandoned house in the illusion. She saw her sister sitting not far away. It was obvious that this place had special meaning for the two of them. Perhaps this was the house they lived in when they were young. At the same time, in the only maternity ward in town, nurses were helping a woman give birth. Everyone was very happy to see the baby, because there were very few babies born in the past few months. But the baby stopped breathing shortly after birth. Everyone sat around the baby and prayed quietly. Then many locals gathered in an abandoned factory. They were people who opposed mining like Annie. Since the evil traders came here, people could no longer find healthy animals or clean water to drink. They believed that one day this town would disappear from the earth because of mining. Liz's daughter, Chloe, was brought here for the first time by her friends. When Chloe saw the eyes of the people around her, she felt like she had found her ideal. But when Chloe returned home, her mother discovered the clue. That time Liz warned Chloe not to get involved with the anti-mine protesters. Otherwise, Chloe would be in danger sooner or later. Because the road was blocked because of the nature of their work, the forensic expert that the police had invited invited had not yet arrived. Liz had to invite the town veterinarian to the ice rink. She asked him to do a preliminary examination of the decomposed bodies. After a few glances, he immediately confirmed that these people had died before being frozen, because he had seen many animals die from the cold. Their death postures were usually very peaceful, but the dead people this time all had frightened faces. It seemed like they were scared to death. A bold idea came to Liz's mind. She was going to ask him to perform an autopsy, but she remembered that it was against the law, so she had to give up. Fortunately, the hospital brought good news. Someone had found the whereabouts of the engineer who left the station. Liz and Evan immediately drove to the indigenous settlement on the ice field. Then they met the chief to ask. That engineer was indeed here, but Liz kept knocking on the door, but no one answered. When she angrily pushed the door open and entered, she saw an old man sitting there holding a hunting rifle. That person was the engineer who left the research station years ago, but he said that this was private territory, so Liz and Evan were chased away before they could ask anything. Based on their many years of experience in solving cases, they felt that this person was very suspicious. At this time, Liz received a phone call from the hospital. The frozen research station employee had woken up. When Liz and Evan heard the news, they rushed to the hospital. From afar, they heard screams in the hospital room. It turned out that this person had extensive necrosis due to the cold. He was in extreme pain. Liz hurriedly asked what happened on the ice. The other person just kept repeating that he was awake. He came back to find us. This was exactly what Clark said when his whole body was shaking in the video. At that moment, someone was causing trouble outside the hospital, so Liz had to run out to deal with it. Only Evan was left in the room. She suddenly saw the other person sitting up. He was very calm and said that she was waiting for Evan. Then he lay down and stopped breathing. When Liz and Evan were about to leave the hospital, they met the assistant who had been waiting for them for a long time. It turned out that he had unlocked Annie's phone. Inside was a video recording the moment before Annie was murdered. It seemed that she had discovered something horrifying. Immediately after that, a terrible scream rang out. The movie turned into a science fiction horror. A man was frozen into an ice statue in the middle of the white snow. But the cause of death was a burnt cornea. The victim's periosteum was cracked, and there were many bite marks all over his body. The strange symptoms made Liz immediately ask the assistant to investigate if anyone in town had ever suffered similar injuries. Liz focused on studying the video Annie recorded before she died. Looking at the surroundings in the video, it seemed that Annie was in an ice cellar. The walls were covered with animal carcasses. At this moment, Liz received a call that the state police were preparing to rescue the cellar. While Liz was on her way to the scene, she unexpectedly met Evan's sister. She was walking in the snow without a coat. Because Evan's sister had a mental illness, Liz had to personally take her back to Evan. This made Evan extremely grateful to Liz. Although the two had many conflicts at work, they still trusted each other at crucial moments. Evan realized that her sister's illness seemed to have relapsed. Evan was not comfortable leaving her sister alone in the suburbs, so Evan decided to find a new care center. She hoped that her sister would live better here. At this time, Liz returned to the police station. Finally, her assistant had a new discovery. He found a patient with similar symptoms to the frozen person named Otis. That person also had a burned cornea and a torn eardrum. Otis was a petty thief who had been arrested many times, but he had been missing for 2 months. Liz suspected that this was an important clue, so she immediately asked her assistant to gather people to search for Otis. But now the entire police force was focused on hunting Clark, so no one was free to look for Otis. Liz immediately called Evan to ask if there was an ice cellar nearby that contained animal carcasses. Evan didn't know, but she suggested to Liz that the two of them ask the locals, because the people here knew the terrain well. Liz and Evan quickly arrived at the house. The homeowner was geologist Thomas. When Thomas finished watching Annie's video, he confirmed that the animal carcasses in the wall were skeletons and muscles. The place in the video was likely near the Brook Mountains, but the ice road there was very complicated. Ordinary people could easily get stuck there. Evan immediately offered to go exploring. Thomas immediately introduced a guide, Otis. He was the one who drew the runway map. Liz was startled when she heard that, because this was the person she was looking for. Unfortunately, Otis was missing. The important clue had been cut off. When Liz watched the video over and over again, she finally discovered another detail. The end of the video seemed like someone had cut off the power. Liz remembered that the video in the research station also ended with a sudden blackout. This could be the method of the crime. The power source in the ice cellar could have come from a generator. There was only one person person capable of setting up such an electrical system, and that was the equipment engineer who had left the research station. Liz and Evan had gone to see him before, but his attitude was extremely unusual. Now that Liz thought about it, it was even more suspicious. Liz asked Evan to find the engineer again. Because he had a weapon, Liz sent her assistant to go with Evan. Because today was Christmas Eve, Liz needed to stay home with her daughter. Although the assistant was not satisfied, he still had to obey. When Evan was about to leave, she received a phone call from her sister. Her sister told her to go to the door to receive her Christmas present. Evan received the gift and smiled. She felt happy that someone still cared about her. But when Evan's sister just hung up, she suddenly discovered an orange rolling out from under the bed. When Evan's sister looked down, she saw a woman with messy hair open her eyes. Although Evan's sister had changed her living environment, her life had not improved. She had suffered enough of the terrifying hallucinations. She took off all her clothes and went deep into the cold sea. At the same time, Evan and Liz's assistant arrived at the local residential area. When they opened the door of the equipment engineer's house, it was completely empty. The house seemed to have been abandoned for a long time. There was a spiral shape on the ground, and a stone with a symbol carved in it was placed right in the middle. The surrounding residents said that the engineer had left since Evan's last visit. When the two asked people about the rock, they kept silent and avoided the question. Evan understood that she could not get any more information. When Evan was about to return to celebrate Christmas with her sister, she received a call from the Coast Guard. They found her sister's body floating on the beach. Evan was desperate and immediately went to the care center. She asked the guard why her sister left there without permission. Then Evan took her anger out on a thug. She rushed to beat him, but was beaten back. Perhaps only this way could help Evan temporarily forget the pain of losing a loved one. Evan, his face covered in blood, wandered to the Manston house. Now she had nowhere to go. At this time, Liz was on her way home when suddenly a polar bear appeared in front of her car. Liz immediately swerved the car and crashed into a pile of snow. The bear looked out the window and let out a few breaths before turning around and walking away. That night, Liz dreamed of her son leaning against her. Suddenly, there was a loud knock on the door. It was Evan reporting the results of the investigation. She found nothing except the spiral stone. Evan suddenly said that her sister had done something stupid. Her sister's body would be brought back soon. Liz was surprised because she had met Evan's sister yesterday. Evan was extremely sad and depressed. Her mother and sister both died of mental illness. Could Evan be the next victim of that disease? Liz reassured Evan, but she believed that this was the family curse. It was as if something was calling Evan. Liz suddenly remembered that the last time they were chasing the thug Evan, she seemed to have seen something, but until now, she still denied it. At that moment, the phone rang. Liz's assistant reported that someone had appeared near the abandoned ship. Evan and Liz immediately went there. It was a very suitable place to hide. The two of them quickly went inside. They saw strange drawings on the wall. When Liz and Evan discovered the spiral symbol on the door, there was a sound of hurried footsteps from upstairs. The two immediately chased after the sound. Evan heard someone calling her, so she turned around. She saw her sister's body floating through the water tank. Evan followed the footprints and saw a glowing Christmas tree. Then she turned around. Liz was still chasing the other person. She finally caught the suspect in the corner. Unexpectedly, that person was Otis, who had been missing for 2 months. Otis's mind was in turmoil, and he repeated the same sentence. After Liz took Otis away, she found Evan sitting there crying with bloodshot eyes. Blood was flowing from Evan's ears. The cold case finally had an important breakthrough. Liz found Otis on the abandoned boat. He was wearing Clark's jacket. Otis's eyes were burned and his eardrums were ruptured. This completely matched the symptoms of the victims. After Liz tried to question Otis, he also revealed a secret that no one knew. 30 years ago, when Otis went on a survey, he suddenly encountered a collapse of ice. Many people trapped inside died one after another. Only Otis heard someone calling him. When Otis followed the sound, he saw a large frozen space. Then Otis woke up in the hospital with severe burns to his eyes and deafness in his ears. Clark had come to Otis a few days ago. Clark wanted to ask him how he escaped death that year. Apparently, the research station staff had felt the call from the land of darkness, and they knew that they were about to die. However, Liz was not interested in such superstitions. Liz took out a map and asked Otis to point out the location of the ice cave where Annie was. Otis pointed to an area and reminded Liz that the ice there was very thin. People who went there carelessly could easily lose their lives. Of course, Liz had to drag Otis along, but he refused to go with her, unless he was paid with some drugs. She knew he was a drug addict, but because she was a police officer, she she could not agree to his request. The two of them argued. Liz could only go with Evan to explore the cave. Unexpectedly, the path up the mountain was blocked by rocks. It was obvious that someone was deliberately preventing the police from investigating. Evan suspected that this matter was related to the Silver Mineral Company, because this area was under their ownership. At the same time, a group of people came to the company's mining area. They were all local people. They protested the serious damage to the land and water source. The people had repeatedly asked to stop the mining, but the company's security team immediately appeared to stop them. The conflict quickly turned into a brawl. The police received the report and arrived at the scene. Evan was also present to help quell the riot. She saw Liz's daughter in the crowd. Evan hurriedly stepped forward to stop a police officer who was attacking. Evan then intended to take Chloe to the police station. Liz was busy at the time. She didn't even spare a glance at her daughter. Liz just told someone else to take Chloe to the detention room. She would deal with her daughter the next day. At this time, Liz's assistant discovered an important piece of information. The sponsor of the research station was the Sliver Company. Therefore, the pollution data they assessed for the mine had no credibility. The reason the Sliver Company was able to mine on the ice for so many years was because of such standard reports. That was also the reason why Liz forbade her daughter from participating in the protest, because the power behind the Sliver Company was extremely strong. Evan reminded Liz that the last time the conflict broke out, the state police were the first to arrive at the scene. They would definitely intervene in this matter. Not long after, Liz received a call from State Officer Connery. He asked to meet her. The location was the headquarters of the Silver Minerals Company. Liz had originally planned to come here to find the person in charge, Kate, to interrogate her, so she brought along the assistant's investigation report. They discovered that the company dared to conduct its own pollution tests through private research institutes. Unexpectedly, Kate pretended not to know anything. She said she would have someone check again later. Kate then turned to question Liz and Evan about why they had entered the private territory of the Silver Company. Since Officer Connery was present, Liz said that they had found an important clue in the ice case. Kate immediately panicked and asked who had pointed out the location of the ice cave. When Liz said it was Otis, Kate immediately felt regretful. Officer Connery reassured Liz that the research station's investigation report had concluded. Before nightfall, the victims had encountered a geological avalanche. Injuries such as ruptured eardrums and damaged soft tissue were all due to sudden freezing. The reason their faces were distorted so terribly was probably because they were hallucinating in the extremely cold environment. That meant that this case originated from a natural disaster. There was no murderer. Therefore, the police did not need to continue investigating. But Liz could not accept this explanation. Moreover, Annie's case was also related to that icy area. Connery suddenly changed his expression and mentioned the old case that Liz and Evan solved together. It was a murder case disguised as a victim doing something stupid. Connery insisted that the thug did not do something stupid. Liz wanted to object, but then she kept silent. After Kate left the company, she immediately went to see Robert. Kate intended to kill Otis because he knew too much. Unexpectedly, Robert and Kate had long cooperated for mutual benefit. Robert had helped the Silver Company do many dirty things. Kate promised that as long as Robert solved this case, she would find a way to help him get promoted to chief of the police department. Meanwhile, after Evan asked many times, she learned that the origin of the spiral-shaped stone was a symbol that the ancients hung in front of the ice cave, because they wanted to warn hunters not to come near. Anyone who entered could be swallowed by the ice. After Evan heard, she understood something. It turned out that the Land of Darkness was the cave where Annie was harmed. Evan immediately went to Liz. No matter what, they had to quickly explore that area because it could be the scene of two crimes. Evan was sure that they would find important clues. Unexpectedly, Liz declared that the case was over, so the police did not need to investigate further. Liz then revealed that Connery knew that the thug would not do anything stupid. Evan was surprised for a moment, but then she still decided to continue investigating. When Evan saw that Liz was as rational as usual, she was not satisfied. That attitude was exactly like when Liz gave up on Annie's case. Evan angrily left. Evan even released Liz's daughter from the detention room. After Liz returned home, she analyzed for a while and still thought she did the right thing. But when Liz went to the neighbor's house to find her daughter, she suddenly changed her mind because Chloe told her the reason for joining the protest. In the past 3 months, 9 babies had died due to difficult births. If the silver company continued to mine, this town would disappear. Liz was very surprised when she heard this. Liz quickly ran to the burial site to check. The bodies of the babies had not yet been buried. Liz sighed when she saw this. She finally had a choice in her heart. If the police could not eliminate this evil silver company, the people in the town would sooner or later die of illness. A series of clues showed that the silver company was closely related to the recent murder case. When Liz returned to the police station to check the evidence, she accidentally caught Robert doing something secretly. She immediately recognized him as the one who had tipped off the state police. Liz immediately called her assistant into the room and easily unlocked his computer password. It was his girlfriend's birthday. From there, Liz realized that Robert had secretly looked at his son's computer. It was her assistant, because only Liz, Evan, and her assistant knew the full details of the thug's case. Although Liz had destroyed many documents, her assistant's computer still had a few photos. One of the photos was suspicious. The thug was left-handed, but the gunshot wound in the photo was from the right. It was obvious that Liz and Evan had killed someone and staged the crime scene. It wasn't hard for Robert to figure that out. Robert immediately informed Officer Connery. Liz could only sigh that fate liked to play tricks. Liz took the key from her pocket and gave it to her assistant, Liz, and told him to move into her backyard. Don't live with that bastard anymore. After Liz left the office, Robert immediately ran to find his son to ask questions, but his son scolded him. His son said he was not worthy to be a police officer. Then his son kicked him out. Not long after, Liz went to the support center and found Otis. Because Liz wanted to clarify the truth of the case, she decided to accept giving drugs to Otis so that he could lead the way to the icy area. At this time, Evan had finished cleaning up her sister's remains. Evan went to Rose to prepare for her sister's burial. Evan would bury her under the seawater under the ice. But when Evan finished and was about to leave, Annie's voice suddenly rang in her ear. Evan instinctively followed the sound and walked forward. The surrounding scene suddenly changed. Evan was startled to realize that she had stepped into the thin ice. At this time, Rose's warning voice rang out. Rose told Evan to lie down and slowly crawl back. Finally, she escaped danger. Rose said that she screamed until her voice was hoarse, but Evan kept walking forward. Evan thought that it was Annie's ghost complaining to her, but Evan was just an ordinary police officer. Without Liz's support, Evan could not continue her investigation. Unexpectedly, Liz quickly called and told Evan to quickly prepare to go into the snow and ice, because Otis had previously pointed out the location of the cave entrance. But they had to wait for him to finish his addiction before they could leave. Just then, the doorbell rang. Unexpectedly, Robert came to Liz's house in the middle of the night. Robert said that he had received a notice from the police, so he came to take the homeless man, Otis, away. While Liz was still surprised, Otis walked out of the bathroom. Robert immediately pulled out his gun. When Robert saw that Otis intended to run away, he did not hesitate to pull the trigger. Then, Robert fired another shot to make sure Otis was dead. The gunshot quickly attracted the attention of Liz's assistant in the backyard. When he saw the scene clearly before his eyes, he was very surprised. Unexpectedly, Robert not only did not repent, but also ordered his son to dispose of the body. Robert even intended to kill Liz. The assistant panicked and immediately pulled the trigger. When Evan arrived at Liz's house, the three of them stood in front of the two corpses for a long time. Liz decided to call and report this, but Evan thought that Liz should not do that. While the police and Silver Company had not yet reacted, they should immediately go into the ice and snow to investigate the truth. Evan told Liz's assistant to stay and handle the scene. Then he had to take the body to Rose Gary. Liz and Evan drove to the ice and snow area. They were preparing to explore the Kingdom of Darkness. Following the advice of the geologists, they drilled a hole at the highest peak of the mountain range. Sure enough, this hole led to the space inside the cave. Liz and Evan did not hesitate to crawl inside. The walls on all 4 sides were covered with thick ice. Under the light, the ice emitted a sparkling fluorescent light. Evan accidentally discovered a small, low turn. Suddenly, she unconsciously crawled inside. Liz had no other choice, so she followed Evan. But they hadn't gone far when they ran out of options. When Liz was about to complain, the ice under Evan's feet suddenly broke. It turned out that there was another independent space below. Liz was extremely panicked. She was about to turn around to find tools when she also fell down. Evan raised his flashlight to look everywhere. A familiar figure appeared in front of her. Unexpectedly, it was the suspect Clark, but soon after, he completely disappeared. When Liz and Evan turned on the lights, they discovered that there were many ice-breaking devices here. Evan raised his his flashlight to shine. A giant spiral symbol appeared above. Liz discovered a hexagonal object in the toolbox. That object completely matched the wound on Annie's body. Could it be that she was harmed here? Evan accidentally saw that the floor had been moved, so she called Liz to help push the iron shelf away. Unexpectedly, there was a hidden secret door behind. Liz and Evan climbed up the iron steps. They hadn't gone far when they came across a metal lid. When Liz opened it, she was extremely surprised. The two returned to the research station office. They didn't expect the cave where Annie had an accident to be connected to this place. That was the reason Clark could suddenly disappear. Liz and Evan began to search carefully everywhere. From the footprints left at the scene, it was clear that Clark was definitely hiding in a room somewhere. Liz was carelessly locked in the cold storage by Clark. Then Evan was also ambushed when she went around the corner. But both of them were strong people. When Liz used an iron bar to break the glass door, Evan pressed Clark to the ground and beat him up. If Liz hadn't stopped Evan in time, Clark would have turned into a cold corpse. Liz and Evan were both experienced in interrogation, so they didn't rush to ask suspicious questions. They took out the video that Annie recorded before she died. They put on headphones and forced Clark to listen over and over again. He had to listen to his lover's painful screams before she died. Clark's screams were even louder than Annie's. While Liz and Evan sat down to dinner peacefully, Clark screamed until he was about to faint. Then Clark began to recount the whole past. It turned out that during the excavation of the research station, he discovered an extremely rare microorganism. That microorganism has the ability to cure all diseases over time. But the permafrost is so hard that mining is extremely difficult. Until the silver company came here to mine, they accidentally discovered contaminated waste that could soften the permafrost. Since then, the efficiency of mining microorganisms has increased dramatically. Evan asked if this had anything to do with Annie's death. Clark continued to tell that not long after he met Annie, she accidentally discovered a notebook. Inside were short lines recording the illegal collusion between the research station and the silver company. Annie was an extremist, so she immediately destroyed all the microorganisms that the research station had collected over the years. Before Annie could leave, she was discovered by a research station employee. The other party frantically stabbed Annie with a tool. When Clark heard the news and rushed over to stop her, it was too late, because the other members had also arrived. When everyone knew that their years of hard work had been destroyed, they all rushed in to attack until Annie was dying. Clark was the one who took her life. He thought that only by doing so could Annie's pain end. Suddenly, Evan remembered and asked who cut Annie's tongue. Clark shook his head and said that Annie's original body was still intact. Until the research station contacted the silver company, they sent Robert to transport the body. Perhaps he was the one who did it. He wanted to warn the people who dared to oppose the silver company. When Liz heard this, she could not bear it anymore. For the sake of the others, they were so crazy. Fortunately, Evan kept his composure this time. Evan did not kill Clark on the spot. Liz and Evan both recalled the scene where they captured the thug many years ago. At that time, Evan saw the tragic scene, so she shot the murderer without hesitation. Now, Annie's murder case has been solved, but the most mysterious cold case is still waiting to be solved. After Liz and Evan calmed down, they continued their interrogation. Unexpectedly, when Clark mentioned this, he panicked. Clark said that it was Annie's ghost coming back to take revenge. That night, the research station suddenly lost power. Clark immediately realized that something was wrong, so he immediately ran into the cave tunnel to hide. His colleagues outside kept calling for help, but Clark did not dare to open the iron door. Immediately after, there were louder banging sounds. Clark thought that it was Annie's ghost that had not left, so he hid in the tunnel for several days. During that time, Clark did not go anywhere. The only time Clark left was to find Otis. Clark hoped to know how to exorcise the ghost. Liz felt that Clark still had something to hide, so she decided to let him calm down for a night before continuing. At midnight, the entire town suddenly lost power. Liz was also awakened by footsteps in the hallway. She followed the figure running outside. Liz only saw Evan standing still in the blizzard. It turned out that Clark had escaped a long time ago, and he had turned into an ice statue. The witness that Liz and Evan had worked so hard to find was now dead. This drove Liz crazy. Liz scolded Evan for not watching Clark carefully. Then Liz suddenly suddenly realized that the power outage meant the heating system would also stop working. Sooner or later, the two of them would turn into ice statues. Luckily, they suddenly remembered that there was a backup generator in the research station, but the fuel was out, so the generator could not be used. As the temperature continued to drop, Liz began to hallucinate. Evan's condition became much more serious. Evan even saw Clark come back to life. Liz and Evan could only light a campfire. Liz did not dare to sleep and sat beside to warm up, but Evan was extremely pessimistic. The snowstorm outside would definitely not stop in a short time. The two of them seemed to be trapped here. Evan also heard the call of his dead sister. Liz was bored with Evan's mysterious words. Liz told Evan to change the topic to talk, but Evan, not knowing what to do, mentioned Liz's son, who had died many years ago. Liz immediately yelled at Evan to shut up. Liz would rather go to sleep than stay here. However, the cold air in the middle of the night was so terrible that Liz could not sleep. When Liz returned to the hall where the fire was burning, she found that Evan had disappeared. The main door leading outside was wide open. Could it be that Evan had run out again? The cold wind carried thick snowflakes. They blew straight into Liz's face, making her feel like she was about to freeze. Liz could still hear unclear calls. When Liz looked down, she saw her dead son calling for help under the ice. Liz broke the ice without hesitation, but the next moment, Liz fell into the water. The near-freezing temperature made her lose consciousness instantly. Fortunately, a strong hand reached down to the water. It turned out that Evan had run to save Liz. Evan pulled Liz back to the fire and kept shaking her. Her son's face appeared in Liz's mind one after another. She finally woke up and escaped from the hallucination. After Liz recovered, her spirit was much better. She felt like she had just experienced another world. Now Liz finally understood why people in the cold room had such faces. It turned out that ice and snow could cause people to hallucinate. Evan asked who wanted to open the iron door of the tunnel. Liz's eyes lit up. She hurriedly ran to the infirmary and took out a few bottles of medicine, then sprinkled the medicine evenly on the back of the iron lid. Under the fluorescent light, several fingerprints were clearly visible. These were the traces left by the murderer when he killed the research station staff. Then he prepared to enter the tunnel to deal with Clark. The population of the town was not large. As long as the police compared each person's fingerprint, they could quickly find the owner of this fingerprint. The owner of the fingerprint was a woman named Smith. This person was a member of the Women's House, established by the people. One time, while Smith was cleaning the research station, she accidentally discovered the underground tunnel. Later, Smith saw Annie's tools appear there many times. Another employee, while cleaning the police station, accidentally saw a photo of Annie's wound. This small organization showed that its solving a case ability was better than the police. They acted extremely decisively and effectively. They immediately identified Annie's killer. Evan was surprised and asked why they didn't call the police. Smith just showed contempt and said that if the police were effective, Annie's case would have been solved long ago. So Smith decided to punish the killer in her own way. First, a group of women cut off the power to the research station. Then they played a pre-recorded horror sound, and they rushed inside unexpectedly. The round-faced man had his neck broken before he could react. Only Clark managed to hide in the tunnel and escape. They transported the research station staff to an area several kilometers away. They forced those people to take off all their clothes and ran away. Not long after, the research station staff were all frozen to death in the snow and ice. The spiral symbol on their foreheads was just a trick to distract them. After Smith finished saying those things, the members of the Women's House appeared one by one. Everyone said that Annie had been dead for many years and that the people in front of them were the murderers. But Liz stood up and announced that the autopsy report was out. All the research station staff died of internal bleeding. This case had actually been over for a long time. It turned out that Liz did not intend to hold these people responsible. However, the hospital still had a suspicion that they had put Annie's tongue in the research station. Smith just smiled when she heard the question. Obviously, she accepted the hospital's speculation. In front of the reporter, Liz not only hid the truth about the tragedy, but also made up a perfect explanation for Robert's disappearance. In fact, Robert's body was thrown into the icy river by Liz's assistant. Evan's actions were even more satisfying. Evan also forced Clark to record a video before he died. In it, he accused the Silver Company of polluting the environment. Today's movie ends here. See you in the next videos.